Hello all, this book learning is on ethics and leadership, the importance of putting theory into practice by William D. Hitt. This book learning is going to be an analysis of what people do, why they do it, how they do it, and really when they do it, and how that will impact the workplace. While it can be applied to employees and subordinates, it's mostly for the implementation of managers and leaders and those who have a careful thought process about why they are motivated to do certain things and how those motivations are prone to evolution throughout their careers or lifetimes. The overarching view for this book is how ethos and leadership are foundational characteristics. They really go hand in hand and cannot be separated from each other. To be a leader, you have to be guided by certain principles. Whatever those principles are, they should generally be unwavering, they should be unchanged, and while they can be prone to simple persuasion, it should take time for those mechanisms to want to change. A leader who has a strong ethical foundation can eventually develop trust within their organization, and that trust really unites all of the independent pieces and movements and cogs into one functioning unit, which is ultimately the goal. Because if an organization is greater than the sum of its individuals, it's not in a manner that's superior, it's in a manner that really drives towards one motivating force. Effective leaders can influence the company, but not just will they influence it with thoughts and words, they'll do it in deed, and they'll be able to implement action. They'll also be able to empower other individuals within the organization to do so themselves. Leaders also prevent the disunity of individuals who may have conflicting ethoses, moralities, opinions, or ethics on a matter. Ultimately, they'll be able to tie the units together and keep them from being dysfunctional. So these are what I call the pillars of ethics, and there are 5 main topics within this book. The principal themes include the importance of values, conflict in values, what constitutes a good life, ethical systems, and styles of leadership. We'll be focusing on the top 3 principal themes as they were the most rich, most compelling, and they really provided a lot of thought-provoking considerations for what it means to examine your own foundational structures of thought, your own principles that guide you in your life, what principles influenced you previously in your life, and how those things may change or develop over time. So the first one will be the importance of values. So Hitt really talks about how there are values, but there are also facts. And generally, values are what sways and influences people more than facts do. Values, they really do one thing, which is portray an enduring belief that something is preferable to something else. An example that he gives is two hirees, 2 people who come in for an interview. One person may have more work experience, but the other may have characteristics that the employer likes, such as trustworthiness or honesty or interpersonal communication skills. They may see those things higher than maturity in a specific skill, and they may choose person B over person A. That would be an example of how values really influence everyday decisions for managers. And they're going to be in the top down and bottom up things as well. Decisions are made consistently, and you really can't be swaying your moral compass or your ethical values based on each decision or each moment. It would create kind of a whiplash effect. So in order to have a strong ability to make decisions, you have to have a foundation of values. And these value systems should endure. It's not that they're unchangeable over periods of time, but they can be set in stone, and they really should be, so you can build upon them and become richer and more depth in your character. It will also allow you to just develop a better discernment when more difficult situations arise. Effective managers should be able to understand their personal systems of values. They may not have to justify themselves in every decision they make to external parties. Sometimes they will, like with stakeholders or employees or customers, but generally they should know what, why, and how they're going to do something, and it should sit well with them. To the right, there's just like a couple bubbles, and they're showing a visualization of characteristics that may be deemed important or worthwhile or excellent. They're called the mode perspective, which we'll discuss a little bit later, and that is focusing on the modes of functionality in a human being. So we'll just look at the characteristics for now, and we'll come back to the modes. So why does it matter? Why are values so important? Values protect managers from falling into a rut or falling into what is called the activity map or activity trap, excuse me. So the activity trap is when you persist in doing something that has no value. It's doing activity for the sake of activity. And a couple examples that HIT gives are when organizations start at the top and they do something and they make subordinates do that same thing with no added value. And they're also avoiding reality by confronting what should change in a system. Maybe things persist because they've always persisted, but that's not really an example of a concrete value. That's more of an action. And values also matter when managers are faced with limited resources. There's that well-known triangle of time versus quality versus money, and they say you cannot pick all three at one time. You generally have to pick two. So if you have concrete values, you'll be able to navigate which characteristics and which circumstances are more favorable to the other. Do you want quality work done, but it will be expensive, or do you want quality work done, but it will take time? So one case study that I was looking up was how Mitsubishi Digital Solutions offers software systems for companies. And this specific company is a California International Wind Turbine System. They also take part in other sustainable energies, so solar panels, wind energies, wave energies, dams. And what they're doing here is integrating the programs that they use. And so this integration is also a way to combat that activity trap that managers faced. So with an integrated system, it combines all of the objectives in a company under one umbrella. Its inputs, its activities, its outputs, and they combine them in a way that is manageable, reasonable, and able to be easily navigated. So our second pillar is conflicting values and what that really means in an organization. So managers often have to make decisions between a wrong and a wrong rather than a right versus a wrong. That means taking into consideration the stakeholders, what is at play, what are the most pressing components of the circumstance, and how you will find a solution that is effective. Oftentimes these dilemmas are economic or ethical. So when they're in ethical situation, it's considering employee care, employee rights, safety, health, communication, compassion. If they're economic, you're looking at the profitability of a situation, you're looking at activities, outputs, return on investments. And ultimately, even if there are conflicts, the resulting decision should be right and it should be good. And that's really playing into two characteristics that make up the decision map, and that involves ethics and economics. So ethics are the right and the wrong, the do and the don't, but the economics are the bad versus the good. So you would want something to be right and good rather than right and bad. And why does this even matter? Managers must be aware of how dangerous it would be to rationalize a decision that is outside of that ethical and economic scale. If you do something that is good but wrong, you should not be able to rationalize those components unto yourself. It just allows you to further perpetuate immoral or unethical behavior, as Van Dyke and Mulder say below. If you consistently rationalize a wrong decision in order to meet the ends of a solution, you have no ethical values. You have not a foothold to truly stand on. And a hypothetical scenario for this, kind of on the employee level, is when you are put up for a promotion, there's a possibility, but you're passed over. And so one reaction could be to say, I never wanted that position, or that position wasn't for me, or something else that is a negative deflection of the true emotions that you're feeling. Your reaction is ultimately not congruent with what you feel on the inside. So managers should really work to avoid rationalizing decisions in their businesses and in their organizations. So our third pillar involves what is called the good life. And this is really the extent of how people will live their lives, what motivates them to live their lives, what affects how their life is lived. It is the mindset of why is a life good. And so he calls this the opportunity to be fully functional or partially functional. And human beings in good measure of health and mental constitution are all presented with the opportunity to make that decision for themselves. When you're able to develop in this area, you develop an actual core identity, an actual ideation that is individualistic. He also says that map creation is what is developed, and that map creation is how you navigate in the world. So rather than following someone else's given map, you will chart your own course, so to speak. And I really thought that Ludwig van Beethoven was so applicable for this section. And this is from a letter that he's writing to two of his brothers. He says, "It is my wish that your lives be better and freer from care than I have had. Recommend virtue to your children. It alone can give you happiness, not money. I speak from experience. It was virtue that upheld me in my misery." And so we know that Beethoven was a forefront and a running leader during the Romantic period of sonatas and symphonies. So here's a man who was dealing with a challenge to his leadership in that musical atmosphere. Because his health was ailing, he was becoming deaf. It was going to be dangerous for him to reveal his illness. And I think why this is important to this whole topic of ethics and leadership is that he is placing virtue above the comforts of life, above what it means to generally be successful for that time. He's revealing his true motivations and a true foundational belief that he has. And so there are a few levels that HIT talks about, and we're going to talk about why that matters. He calls these things modes of being. And so these modes of being, he says they're ladder rungs. And the ladder rungs are interesting. The empirical existence that starts at the top is technically the bottom rung. And you're supposed to work your way up there. And the great thing about this is that no human being is completely stuck on one rung. They're able to fully develop. And so these things are a framework rather than something to concretely live your life by. The empirical existence that he describes is an individual who says, I am motivated by pain and I am motivated by pleasure. Those are my foundations for living. Next is the consciousness at large. And this person really understands right from wrong, and that's their guiding force in decision making. The spirit, they really live to be a part of a community. They see the organizational guidelines, they see communal guidelines, and they live well by them. But the existence, that is focusing on a independent path that is acknowledging the other rungs but choosing to make another way for themselves. These modes of being are all extremely important to leaders and managers. We constantly hear about how organizations have leaders who are maybe eccentric or talented in an area, and they really excelled because they were able to separate themselves from the pack at the time. So, returning to why these things are important, it's putting ethics into practice. Managers, they should be able to not just be transactional or transformative, but it's really a measure of both. You're looking to move an organization forward, but you're also looking to uplift those individuals around you. You can really only do that if you have a congruent and rational method of making decisions that affect other individuals. So your actions, your thoughts, and your style should all be in alignment. When you have an ethical strategy, it should be developed first, it is implemented, and then it is consistent. And this is kind of a callback to the pain that a lot of organizations face. If you're trying to move people into a new strategy or a new goal, it can be difficult. But as the leader, you're able to convey a sense of trust, a sense of strength, and a sense of hope in an endeavor that should be a positive goal. And so a consideration that I wanted to pose to the class was this. If you're a current or a future leader, what are your 3 major personal codes of conduct? Do you follow them staunchly, or are they prone to being flexible? How might you reevaluate a value that seems important but is not always disciplined in use? Thank you for your time.